Hello, everyone, and welcome to the most amazing PEI real estate podcast and Prince Edward Island knowledge network available to mankind. It's the Patty and Michael Show. I'm Michael. This is Patty.
Hi, Michael. How are you? Hi, everybody. Yes, we have an exciting topic tonight.
Yes, we do. This is twice as exciting as the last topic which was wells, your water supply. So today we're covering what we tried to cover in the last podcast, but we didn't have enough time. We're discussing septic systems, how they function, why you need them, why you don't need them, in the comparison to municipal community systems, what's involved, what you should watch out for. And we're going to save the best to last, what you should have in that system that is usually not installed. And if it isn't, you could have major problems. So essentially, I guess I'll start off with explaining the difference between we'll call it a normal house in a city or a community. Typically, your toilets, your shower, your bathtubs, your sinks all end up draining out through one common pipe into a municipal treatment system. Or in some cases, if you're in a smaller community, they may have basically a smaller model of the same thing processing the wastewater. That's how that system works. It works great. You don't have to do anything because it's all maintained by the government, city, the community, municipality, whomever. Now, when you're moving to Prince Edward Island, you're going to find that when you're outside of the major centers, Summerside, Charlottetown, Stratford, Cornwall, Montague, you're going to have a septic system. And that has been a common question within the last few months, as everyone from the big city, most of them from southern Ontario, are asking, what is a septic system? Do you have to maintain them? What should I look for? Can you inspect them? So essentially the way a septic system works is that pipe that we usually go to the municipality or community to take care of, it goes into a holding tank. These holding tanks, back in the old days, it could have been anything. Could have been a 57 Chevy body. And then they traversed to a cement holding tank, which was typically underground by probably 2 to 3, 4 feet. And then recently they had the plastic tanks that had one lid exposed, so you could see these green. They're typically a green or a dark green.
Right, sir. They're right, yeah.
They call it a riser, so it goes from the tank to the ground. And recently they've asked for 2 risers. You've seen that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right? So from that tank, it goes to what they call a weeping tile field. I don't know why they call it a tile field, because there's no tiles. Basically, it's a series of plastic perforated tubes or pipes that are covered with almost like a pantyhose, super fine synthetic mesh. And then that's the end of the system. Typically, when you place the systems, the septic field has to be away from your water supply, which we discussed in the last episode, which would typically be a drilled well. Do these systems require maintenance? Depending on who you talk to, the septic guys will tell you it depends how many people are in the house, how much use. Is it a seasonal residence? I mean, some of these septic tanks don't get pumped for 30 years. A lot of the septic guys will recommend they're done every 2 to 3 years.
Well, the rule of thumb is if it's one person every 10 years, if it's 2 people every 5 years, if it's a family of 3, 4 or more, anywhere from 2 to 3 years, it should be pumped.
So that just empties the holding tank. And what time of the year do you not do this?
You do not do that in the fall if it is a seasonal property.
Right. You do not want to leave the tank empty when frost hits the ground, because typically especially with the cement tanks, they will crack. And once they crack, that's game over. You're pulling out and putting probably a new plastic one in with the riser. As far as maintenance, they should be pretty maintenance-free other than pumping them in whatever intervals you choose to pump them. When you buy a property, it's kind of a joke. They say we're going to inspect the septic system, but considering most of it's underground and you have a tank that's buried, what are you going to inspect? You're going to inspect, is the tank cracked? Is the lid there? Is it working? What are the levels of the contaminants in the tank or the waste? What else?
Yeah, so
They'll look at the field. They'll see if there's anything obvious there. Like, I mean, if there's all kinds of really gross stuff coming out of your backyard where the field
sometimes
is, that's never good.
Field is, if it's wet, then yes, you probably, that's a concern. There's definitely a leak. They will ask, when was the last time the tank was pumped? That's very important for a septic company because it's not always the same septic company that comes back in, especially if it's part of a purchase and sale agreement. A buyer may opt to have their own septic company, assuming they would think that, maybe the septic company that's been looking after it is somehow,
prejudicial or biased.
Correct.
There's a big septic tank pumping scheme.
Yeah. So they may opt, and that's fine. So that new septic company is going to ask, when was the last time it was pumped? Based on that, they'll be able to gauge how much refuse is inside of the tank, and does that make sense based on the number of people living in there? If the tank is dry, there's a really good chance that the tank is cracked. One thing, Michael, that I wanted to point out too is I've had multiple septic companies tell me the lifespan of a septic tank is only around 16 to 18 years. So there are tanks that last longer, I know. But
Cement or plastic?
Cement. A cement tank, they say the life expectancy, they will only guarantee it up to about 16, pushing it 18 years. After that, it is, bonus years.
Right, but the new ones would be good forever, one would think.
Yeah, the plastic ones, I'm not sure if they have a lifetime warranty, lifetime being 25 plus years, but they would be pumping it and depending on that. Now, another thing when you were talking, Michael, that I just think our listeners need to know, if there is a crack in the tank, and you assume, okay, well, we're going to, part of our purchase and sale agreement, renegotiate whatever the situation is, whatever you're able to do, and request a new septic tank. Maybe it's been determined that the lines are working. It's just the tank that needs to be replaced. Please know that the soil, depending on how long it's been leaking, it takes, and this is from the environment here on Prince Edward Island, it can take up to 3 years for the soil to replenish itself and to be able to filter and remove the contaminants in it. So now I'd be mindful of your water.
Yeah, because it's going to turn into a big shit show. Right? Okay. Trivia question. What do they call the vehicle that empties the septic system?
Aside from a septic tank,
The honey wagon.
That's pretty funny, Michael.
I didn't make it up. I just pass along the information. So Patty touched on something there. When you initially develop a property, so you build your house and then you have plans to put a septic system in, this touches on to something that can cost you an awful lot of money if it's not researched properly. And what that is your septic field has to sit in a tested soil. In other words, you're going to do what's called a percolation test. On my YouTube channel, there's a bunch of videos on it. But essentially what they're going to do is they're going to determine by digging and putting a little test tube in the wall and seeing how fast the water comes up into their hips as they're climbing into the hole, what the permeability of the soil is. And there's basically 3 main usable categories in PEI. There's category 1, which means it's perfect. You just dig your holes, you put your tank in and your field, and you're done. So the costs are minimal. Category 2 would be you would have to add some fill, whether it's a foot or 2. You're going to have to add some fill. Again, not a huge deal. May add a few grand to the project, $2,000 or $3,000, would you say?
Yeah, I would agree.
Category 3 is you basically want to find your vehicle, start it, and drive away really fast. Because unless it's some phenomenal site, Category 3 means you need an engineered system. And an engineered system is done by an engineer. So they would develop a system that would work in that Category 3 environment. And you're going to see them add maybe a ton of fill. So you're going to have this giant anthill in your backyard, possibly. You may have a lift station. It just adds a lot of complication. So you're best off steering away from that, because with complication comes maintenance failure, mechanical dysfunction. It's much better just to have a pipe go into a bunch of perforated plastic tubes and pantyhose than it is to have a lift station with a pump and all kinds of stuff and doodads, fuses and breakers, and you also have to power this stuff, so now you're getting into electrical costs. I have seen in my experience sometimes where people do really stupid things and they'll have a category 1 or 2 lot, but then they'll build their house and then the government will come along and rearrange or raise the road, and then category 1 goes to category 3. So because they delayed the septic system and they built their house high and they're moving the water all over the place, and that year it was a high amount of snow and that melted, it just turns into a disaster. So do your planning properly and don't leave the septic system to the last minute. Make it part of the build and try to sustain category 1 or 2 if you possibly can, which in most places you can. Any comments?
No, I think you covered that part.
Oh, come on. There has to be comments.
No, I totally agree along with you. And Michael, in all fairness, you've had far more experience being a property developer and developing subdivisions yourself. This is your area. You know what you're talking about.
I know my crap.
Yes, you know your crap.
Now, another trivia question, what is the one device that insurance companies are either suggesting or making it mandatory for homeowners to have installed, if it doesn't already exist recently, in a septic system? The time is ticking. Do we have a clock?
Are you talking about backflow valve?
Very good. So maybe you could explain what that is and what it does. And this is something you want installed, in my opinion, not being a plumber or septic expert, regardless of what your sewage is being transported to, whether it's municipal, communal. We didn't even talk about holding tanks, which are fairly rare in PEI. But in my opinion, it should be installed in all properties.
My understanding of a backflow valve is it prevents, if there is, and it works both ways, if there's a city line backup, it prevents it from backing up into your house. And if there's plugged inside your home, someone decided to flush something they shouldn't have down the toilet, or it prevents it from getting into the city's municipal line, causing major problems for the subdivision.
Or the municipality.
Correct.
Right. You probably want to have one of those installed. I certainly wouldn't make it part of a purchase and sale, and I usually negate negotiating over things on a material basis. It's always best to negotiate monetarily, so you're not getting into who can install it, when they can install it, was it good enough, is it not good enough. But that's a topic for another podcast. I think we've covered it.
I think we've covered all we needed to cover on.
One final point, regards to septics and wells, is that generally speaking, because of our soil types and the lack of bedrock, they aren't that expensive of a system or systems to install in PEI versus other places like Nova Scotia, Ontario, or BC, Alberta, where you're drilling or digging through hard rock, potentially for hundreds of feet in the case of a well. So you can get prices on this. Patty and I can give you a list of people that can supply it. With reference to septics, we'll talk wells. There's probably only 3 or 4 well drillers in the province. And with septics, they have to be certified by the province. So there is a list of septic people on the provincial website. So you can probably Google gov.pe.ca, septic installers, pumpers, whatever. And there's probably, last time I checked, there's probably 30 or 40.
Yep, that's what I was going to say.
And they're very location basis. That's because as nice as the honey wagon is to travel in, it's not something you want to be driving across the country. Do not purchase one of these for your personal use as an RV. They only want to travel a few miles away from wherever they're located. So the septic system pumper, the honey wagon, as well as the installers, are only going to want to work in their local areas unless you want to pay major dollars for travel costs. Any other tips?
No.
Would you suggest buying a honey wagon as an RV?
No, Michael, I would not suggest that either. But And I don't like following them on the roads. They're always a little bit of a fear for me. I think that's it.
Okay. Well, have a good day. Thanks for listening.
Have a great day.
All three of you.